The moment they decided I was the intern did not arrive with an announcement. It slipped into the room quietly, just after the senior manager waved a hand toward me and told the others to let me sit in the corner. The tone was casual, almost friendly, the kind of tone people use when they have already placed you in a category that serves them. No one questioned it. No one corrected it. They simply rearranged the meeting around that assumption. What struck me most was not the title they gave me, but the way it allowed them to reshape the hierarchy. With one careless remark, they created a structure where I stayed small and they remained comfortable. The smirks were subtle. The quick glances were even subtler. You learn a lot about people when they believe you hold no weight. They speak louder, they interrupt more freely, and they forget that every room is a place of record. I watched them speak over each other while I stayed silent. They believed silence meant inexperience. They believed age could be dismissed when wrapped in the costume of an intern. Yet in their eagerness to overlook me, they overlooked something far more important. They stopped checking who owned what. They stopped confirming who had the authority to request a meeting or call for a vote. They accepted a story that fit their comfort and never imagined it could cost them their positions. As I sat there, one thought settled in quietly. The most dangerous people in a room are not the loud ones or the confident ones. The most dangerous are the ones you stop verifying. I never corrected them because age teaches a different form of discipline. When someone decides you are without asking, the instinct of a younger person is to defend a title or recite a list of achievements. At this stage of life, you learn that ego is expensive and explanations rarely change a mind that has already settled into comfort. So I let their version of me stand. I let them enjoy the story they created because I needed to see how far they would go when they believed I held no authority. There were moments when I could have interrupted. Moments when I could have placed my credentials on the table and watched their expressions collapse. Yet experience teaches patience in a way youth rarely understands. Silence is not submission. Silence is a space where people reveal themselves without realizing it. Every meeting became a quiet study. Every conversation exposed who felt threatened, who relied on shortcuts, and who carried decisions without understanding their consequences. By staying silent, I allowed them to speak freely. They joked. They dismissed. They complained about procedures they had never bothered to learn. They referenced policies they barely understood. All of this unfolded while I sat with the same calm posture. They trusted their assumptions more than the facts available to them, and that trust became a window I watched carefully. With time, the room gave me more information than any confrontation could have provided. They told me their weaknesses. They told me their fears. They told me who depended on appearances more than substance. In the end, one principle guided every choice I made. Silence gathers information faster than confrontation ever will. While they were laughing, I was watching the details that kept the company alive. Their conversations floated around the room with the confidence of people who believed paperwork existed only to slow them down. I saw meeting notices that no one had read carefully. I saw attendance lists signed without attention. I saw documents moved from one folder to another with no understanding of what they implied. When they joked about titles and influence, I studied the share counts printed on an old report left on the conference table. The numbers were precise, yet the dates told another story. Nothing had been updated in years. The registry that determined who could vote and who could call a session had been neglected, pushed aside for louder topics that felt more exciting to people who preferred noise over structure. As they debated loudly about decisions they believed they controlled, I reviewed the voting threshold silently. Authority in a company does not come from the person who speaks the most. It comes from documentation that rarely changes and rules that reward those who read them. Every page I reviewed confirmed the same truth. They were working from assumptions, not records. They were leading from memory, not verification. By the time the meeting ended, their laughter told me more about the culture than any orientation manual could have offered. They trusted convenience more than accuracy. They trusted volume more than evidence. They trusted their habits more than the procedures designed to protect them. In that moment, a quiet understanding settled in. Systems age. People forget. Leverage waits patiently for the one person who still pays attention. I waited until the building emptied before making the call. The silence in the corridor felt different after hours, as if the walls themselves were relieved to rest from the noise of people who believed they understood everything. I sat at my desk, reviewed the procedure one last time, and dialed the number listed on the old registry. There was no emotion in the gesture, no desire to accuse or confront. I simply followed the process that had been ignored for too long. When the voice on the other end answered, I stated my name calmly and requested a shareholder meeting. It was a simple sentence, spoken without urgency. The reaction was not immediate. I heard papers shifting and a soft inhale that carried more meaning than any argument. They were trying to remember the last time such a request had been made. They were also trying to place my name in a context they had never bothered to study. I repeated the date and confirmed my availability. Still no challenge. Still no protest. Only quiet recognition that someone had surfaced with authority they had not expected. I thanked them and ended the call. The entire exchange lasted less than 2 minutes, yet it carried the weight of a decision that would alter the direction of several careers. As I gathered my things, the building felt even quieter. I understood then that procedures do not frighten people. Procedures are predictable. What unsettles them is a reminder of the rules they forgot to respect. And reminders have a way of arriving without warning. I entered the room quietly, the same way I had entered every meeting before. The faces were familiar, yet something in their posture had shifted. The chairs were arranged with more care, the conversation was softer, and the glances were sharper. They believed I was there to observe, just as I had always done. No one questioned my presence. No one imagined my role had changed. Their confidence rested on an assumption they had repeated to themselves so often that it became a truth they no longer examined. As the meeting began, folders were placed on the table with a weight that silence made heavier. The first document circulated slowly, passed from hand to hand with growing caution. I watched their expressions tighten as they reached the page where names appeared. My name rested beside a percentage they had never bothered to check. A percentage they had dismissed as irrelevant in a registry they had failed to update. No one spoke. They simply stared, moving their eyes between the printed figures and the seat I occupied quietly at the end of the table. The second document followed, confirming voting thresholds they believed they controlled. Each page carried details that did not rely on opinion. The numbers stood firm, unaffected by mood or hierarchy. Authority shifted without noise, carried by records that had waited patiently for someone to read them. Their earlier confidence dissolved into a careful silence that belonged to people discovering a truth they should have known. I did not speak. I simply turned each page with steady hands. And as the weight of the documentation settled over the room, one reality became impossible to ignore. Laughter fades quickly when math enters the room. I did not need to speak for the room to understand what was unfolding. The documents continued their quiet journey from one side of the table to the other, each page carrying information that had been ignored for years. Ownership records lay in plain sight. Voting rights appeared beside names that had been overlooked. Past signatures confirmed decisions that were far more permanent than anyone had remembered. As the papers settled, the atmosphere thickened with a recognition no speech could have produced. The first person to understand was the one who believed his authority was unquestioned. He studied the page in front of him with growing stillness, as if the numbers were rearranging his confidence in real time. His certainty dissolved as he traced the signatures beside mine, realizing the implications with a clarity that needed no explanation. Others leaned in, reading faster, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. Each person arrived at the same conclusion at a slightly different moment, creating a ripple of awareness that spread across the room with quiet precision. No one looked at me directly, yet every movement revealed their new understanding. The hierarchy they trusted had been held together by assumptions, not facts. The documents did not raise their voices. They did not accuse. They simply revealed what had been true long before this meeting began. In that silence, the room learned a lesson that arrives only once in a career. Authority is not lost through confrontation. It collapses when the truth is placed calmly on the table and allowed to speak for itself. I left the room before the discussion began. There was nothing more for me to observe. The documents had already delivered everything that needed to be said. As I stepped into the hallway, the door closed behind me with a soft sound that carried more finality than any raised voice. I walked away knowing the meeting would continue without me and that my presence was no longer required to influence the outcome. When facts are undeniable, they guide events on their own. While I waited in the lobby, the building hummed with its usual late afternoon rhythm. Phones rang. Elevators moved. Conversations drifted through the air without concern for what was unfolding behind that closed door. Yet I knew the tone in the boardroom had changed completely. They were no longer debating ideas or discussing future plans. They were dealing with consequences that could not be postponed. The vote took place quietly. No announcements. No messages sent to call me back. Decisions at that level rarely arrive with ceremony. Removal was the first step. Restructuring followed. Then came the inevitable focus on damage control, handled in hushed tones meant to protect reputations that had already slipped beyond rescue. Careers that had grown from volume and assumption began to fold with surprising speed. By the time the boardroom door opened again, everything had already been settled. People exited with guarded expressions, careful to avoid my eyes. They understood what had happened, even if no one spoke a word about it. I collected my things without hurry. Some endings do not require applause or confrontation. Power does not argue. It finalizes. To those who have spent a lifetime watching rooms change around you, I speak to your experience. You know that titles rise and fall with trends, yet structures remain steady beneath the surface. You have seen colleagues chase attention while forgetting that real authority is built through consistency, not volume. When you are underestimated, the first instinct may be to correct the offense, yet age teaches a different wisdom. The moment you defend yourself loudly, you step into the frame they created for you. The moment you stay steady, you guide the frame back to truth. I learned that silence is not weakness. Silence is a form of memory. It gathers details that impatient people overlook. It reveals who respects process and who relies on appearance. It exposes ambition without discipline. Every time someone dismissed my presence, they gave me a clearer view of their blind spots. I did not need to raise my voice to reclaim standing. I only needed to let the record speak. Documents carry a weight that pride cannot outrun. Procedures protect those who understand them. Facts remain calm even when tempers rise. For anyone who has been ignored, minimized, or misplaced, remember what truly endures. Your preparation. Your history. Your ability to act without noise. Never rush to correct disrespect. Let the system you supported for years reveal what others tried to hide. Consequences are patient, and they arrive with perfect timing. In the end, one truth remains constant. People who mistake visibility for ownership always learn too late who the room truly belonged to. This lesson grows clearer with age and rewards steady minds.